Korhaliller.
Thank you. Cool. So, I'd like to invite on stage for our panel. We have Nicholas Merten, founder of DataDash. We have Vita Martin, a digital marketing specialist. Nicholas Merten, the founder of DataDash. And Rachida Brocklehurst, the marketing communications manager at EAK Digital. Awesome. So thank you for everyone for sticking with us for this esteemed panel. So welcome to the panel, everyone. So obviously this social media panel is about how social media is impacting business processes today. And we're going to kick off very generally and dive in a little bit deeper. So my first question to you guys would be, which business processes are now currently being disrupted by social media at this stage?
Yeah, one thing I think that would be a really good way to frame how social media has changed business, especially in a lot of the emerging industries that are here today, from cryptocurrencies, blockchain, esports, VR, is a book that was put out by Gary Vaynerchuk a few years back, really before he blew up. It was something called the Thank You Economy. And the Thank You Economy was focused on the fact that on social media, you now have a conduit for consumers of certain types of products and services to be able to complain directly to companies, but also provide positive feedback. So there's a direct channel to get not only customer support, but also voice your concerns as a user of the platform. And I think that's put companies in a really interesting position where back a few decades ago, they didn't feel that pressure to really provide a service for clients because if they had a complaint, it wasn't much of a concern. They couldn't voice it unless they made it all the way to the media. So I think that's a huge dynamical change. And it's actually very beneficial in the long term, as we'll probably talk about, for emerging sectors of tech.
I think it also really exposes businesses, so there has to be a real sense of transparency as well. Exactly on what was just mentioned, the time where you could maybe not act in the best way to a customer and they would be quite quiet in response, that time has definitely passed, and now there's very much a dialogue that is open on social media when it comes to business processes, because you can actually hear feedback directly, in which case you have to be able to respond properly and to have those open doors and channels of communication and transparency.
I would also to add in that social media, it might be sometimes overlooked, but a very good channel to increase your sales. You can use different techniques for it. You can use retargeting, you can use direct sales, you can use your sponsored ads. And I think that is what any online or e-commerce business should look into and utilize.
Awesome. So obviously social media has changed business processes in that it's always on, 24/7, instant feedback, whether that's negative or positive. So how have businesses had to adapt to that?
I think there has to be a real look at the internal structure of a business now, whereas before you would have your classic sales team, your marketing team, finance team, HR. We now have to have specific roles that cater to looking after community engagement, to dealing with customers face-to-face, although through a digital medium. And we can't necessarily just bring people from one department to another and expect them to be able to deal with that. There's specific skill sets which these people have to acquire and have to nurture in order to be able to portray the business and the company in the best possible light, and to actually help the consumer and to help the customer, because ultimately that's what makes a successful business. It's all about the customer.
To build on that in the sense of helping your customers, building that goal of having a successful long-term customer over the next few years, I've seen really two things, and I think, again, keeping relevant to a lot of the interesting industries that are here today, there's two things that I've seen very commonly. One, instead of just having a social media presence for your company, having employees or staff on the team who are working directly inside the company, responding to feedback, has been something I've seen in a lot of blockchain and crypto projects, as well as those in emerging sectors like VR. And speaking about virtual reality, I know that there are a lot of different companies out there, from HTC as well as Oculus, that have directly communicated with the kind of niche community that's involved in these emerging sectors like VR, because they're your best customers. They're the ones who are testing out your tech. They're the ones that are actually giving feedback contributing to the code that's available to them. And I think that's so important not only for the companies, so there's a beneficial side effect of it, but also you're building and retaining customers who have an invested stake and have provided contributions to it.
Awesome. So which social media channels right now do you think are having the biggest impact, on business processes?
I still believe that Facebook is probably the biggest social media platform, but I would always look at it. It depends who your client is. It depends who you're trying to sell. So someone might sell things on Pinterest, and others might sell things on Facebook. So you really need to understand who your customer is, find out where they hang out, and go get them.
I would say it really depends on the market you're trying to touch. If what you're doing is very brand aware, very driven around brand awareness, if it's a very visual business in this case, where you're selling kind of I think kind of the Coca-Cola style of marketing, where you're trying to sell a lifestyle, Instagram, Snapchat is very much down that line. But again, it really does depend on tailoring towards your client. If you're more of an emerging kind of industry, technology, and you're trying to make a social presence, it's really not difficult if you try to reach for those people who are your core audience. And I think that you find those people on social platforms, still very much like Facebook, Twitter, that provide some way for communities to engage to some degree. Reddit is a great one as well, I think, for a lot of these where people can have forums of discussions. But again, it does have to do a lot with tailoring to your specific audience. And hopefully we'll see some changing different platforms over the next few years to see where that landscape goes.
I totally agree with that, and I think what's also really important to understand is not necessarily what the platforms are, but how they're being used by the customer, and also how you can use them through your business. So Instagram is obviously one of the most popular social media channels at the moment. You've got the Instagram feed where you can obviously post your wins, if you're speaking at an event, for example, that's something that you would put on your Instagram feed, but you can use Instagram stories to show the behind the scenes of your business. And ultimately, that's what people are really, really interested in at the moment. It's understanding your business and your brand at a deeper level. And again, it ties into what we spoke about earlier, which is the transparency and showing more than what businesses necessarily wanted to project 10 or 20 years ago.
Yeah. So, obviously working in the crypto blockchain space, myself and Nick, and obviously Rachida as well, we're seeing, many decentralized social media platforms pop up. Maybe not quite with the adoption that we're looking for right now, but hopefully in the future we'll see that. So I'm really interested to know whether having a decentralized social media platform as opposed to a centralized media platform, whether that will have any impact on the kind of business processes that we're looking at today.
Yeah, I think, when we started off, I guess on the panel, we talked about kind of providing an open framework for people to communicate with companies and projects. And I think that with these kind of censorship-resistant platforms, if one of them does take off, you're going to have that same censorship-resistant nature of cryptos where you'll be able to speak your mind, and there is no censorship, there is no filtering out. It provides an open framework for people to really provide feedback to companies. And I think that's a good thing for the most part, but at the same time, to be completely rational in the sense of the crypto space, as you mentioned, a lot of these alternative projects have a long way to go. We're really reaching 1 or 2% of the world that cares about that topic of having a really free open domain to discuss. So we need to build platforms that are much more built for a wider audience or add unique selling propositions outside of that. And I can think of one off the top of my head. I got to interview the founder of the project. It's called Minds.com. And basically, they're aiming to be kind of a next generation Twitter, Facebook hybrid. And they've offered a lot of interesting services. So I think we were talking a little bit off stage, and I think I'd love you to build on this. We were talking about how you have to add functionality to attract users onto your platform. And a lot of people kind of run into the anxiety of going onto a platform or trying to start a profile on some kind of platform for their company to get involved in social media. And you run into the issue where you feel like you can't stand against the competition. It's very hard to start from ground one. So what Minds does is they actually will help promote and give you a position on the platform, even if you don't have a ton of followers at the start, to help give you that first grounding and really get your material out there. And if people like it, it hopefully gives you a good start off, and you can start to grow from there.
And I think, again, it's remembering why people are on social media in the first place. They want to be part of a community. They want to be able to express themselves and feel that they're doing so in a safe space. But also, along with being able to consume content that businesses or brands or influencers push out there, they want to have the opportunity to push their own content out there as well. And I think what we will see in the example that you've just spoken about is actually being rewarded for using the platforms rather than punished for starting a new one maybe a few years later than other people have.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think we all seen like some big mistakes that brands have made on social media in the past, how not to do social media. So I'd love to know, what are the biggest mistakes companies are currently making that has a direct impact on their business process, and on their bottom line?
I could say one thing that I always see very commonly, and I think we kind of agreed about it when we were discussing beforehand, how there's an issue that most people feel social media is just kind of something you have to do, and along with that, they tend to use it as a platform to just simply post announcements, to simply just post general kind of updates on their company, and they don't try to find engaging ways to interact and build a community online. So they don't engage with the community. They don't take feedback directly from the community. I worked at a previous startup before I did my YouTube channel where we would constantly build as many channels as possible to get customer feedback and engage with them. And every week we added new features based off of what our users wanted. And we spent money on marketing, but the thing was most of our marketing came from word of mouth because of that. And that's, again, the concept of the thank you economy, where you listen to your client's feedback and you make that one customer turn into 3 to 5 customers inevitably. So again, big mistake that a lot of companies make. They just use social media as a standard. They just register accounts, and then I think, as we've talked about, they just kind of die off.
I would also to add that using social media to retarget your future customers, it's an extremely good platform. So make sure that you have remarketing strategy in place. Make sure that you get traffic to your company's website, and perhaps people didn't take an action you wanted them to take. Make sure you get them back by remarketing to those customers using social media platforms. I have seen a lot of very successful brand growth just implementing a very, what would think, small and tiny.
So you're talking about kind of like retaining programs through like having users on a social platform, but then also using ad campaigns to keep them recurring.
Absolutely, absolutely. And depending where they are in their buying journey, then you can craft your ads based on that. So you can send different message. You can segment your campaigns and really be very targeted with your remarketing on Facebook in particular. Same with Instagram, Pinterest, and other bigger ones.
It's quite interesting, actually, because obviously if we do build out these decentralized platforms that I'm very passionate about, obviously we're not going to be tracking people's, hopefully not like their data, their privacy, which ultimately means that retargeting might not even be possible on decentralized platforms. Excuse me if I'm wrong, which maybe means that marketing actually wouldn't be as effective using a decentralized social media platform as a centralized platform. Don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that and how you'd negate that.
So with data, I think, as soon as somebody comes onto your website, I hope that everyone has a privacy policy, everyone has a cookie policy, and it's very well explained how their data is going to be used. And so by going onto your website, people opt in, and they obviously have an option to opt out from any future marketing. But that is a very important detail. I would imagine every company would have.
One thing, again, I don't want to push too much on crypto and blockchain, but who here possibly who's attending the panel, who here has used the Brave browser by chance? Has anyone used that? So I got a few hands in here. If you haven't already, try the Brave browser out. It's created by the original founder of the Mozilla Firefox program and the creator of JavaScript. And it's basically a browser that you can opt out and have complete privacy, no ads, no trackers. And you can also opt in for advertisements that are even to a slight degree tailored to you. But the way that they do it is unlike, for example, Google and Facebook, whereas in Facebook marketing, they have an absolute profile. They have your identity and your profile behind it and what you're engaging with, things that sort. On Brave, as a new browser, they don't actually tie your identity with it, but they do tailor advertisements to the way that you browse the web. And you can, again, opt in for this, and you get rewarded for it as well. You get paid in the basic attention token, which is the token for the ecosystem that's required to purchase advertising on the platform. So they have a very interesting model. It's been one of the most successful I've seen. And I hope that they're able to continue growing the ecosystem around BAT, the token, and be able to build a social platform where you can support content creators like myself, which you're going to do now with the BAT token. And then also, again, have a social platform where you can support content creators on a more social media side platform rather than just content.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think that's definitely the sweet spot. if we can see that implemented in social media as well, I think that'll be very strong. Let's watch this space, I guess. So just moving back away from the crypto decentralized world, what do you think of the opportunity costs, for businesses that are kind of neglecting the social media side of things, or aren't listening to their customers right now, as opposed to businesses that are embracing social?
I think, well, there's a few things. So first of all, as I mentioned earlier, social media is a free, if you want to use it in a free way rather than paid advertising, it's a free way to really push your business and your brand in front of the people that really care about it. You can create a two-way dialogue. So you're not only pushing content out, but you're understanding and having feedback directly from people, which really is priceless. And I think businesses that don't utilize this properly, they face a few issues here. So they can experience a lack of credibility, and ultimately businesses should be based on credibility and trust. And I know maybe trust is not so much part of blockchain and cryptocurrency in a certain way, but more traditional businesses. And if you're really wanting to push your brand out there on social media, if you're thinking about not necessarily responding back to people that comment on your content or engaging with them and asking them questions, then I think there's so much that you're missing out on. Primarily your customer care, your transparency and brand awareness. And all those things can be done without spending any money at all.
Agreed. I believe that every company in today's environment should have social media strategy implemented in their marketing plans. The way I look at it, there has to be part of a holistic marketing approach, and social media has a very big part of it.
Yeah. I think there's an interesting format to social media where you have to find interesting dynamics on how to engage and build community. So again, going back to that point we talked about earlier, where there's the issue where people just use social media as a feed to just put stuff out. One thing that I saw was very interesting, and I guess this is a little bit outside the realm of, say, major social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook, but many people might have used project management software like Trello, for example, which allows you to create boards. Yep. And there was a really interesting way where I think it was eToro and a few other companies had utilized basically Trello boards, which are just tasks of things that they were aiming to achieve and add to the website, and community members could engage with it. So it was a direct channel where users could know that the developers are going to see exactly what I want in the platform, like what I believe is good, what's a feature I don't really care about, how I should change this, how they should change this feature, things of that sort. So finding unique ways to integrate social media with much more interactive ways to build long-term users is something that I'm really interested in seeing over the next few years, rather than, again, just using it as a feed. And like you mentioned, monetizing it with your potential clients as well.
Cool, so we've got about 90 seconds left, so we've got about 30 seconds each here. So if we have one takeaway for our esteemed audience to take away in terms of how they should be using social media moving forwards, what would that be?
I think remember what your values are in your business, and use social media to showcase how important your business's beliefs and values are to connect with your audience. Because ultimately, it's never about you, it's always about your audience, and building that connection and making them feel a certain way so they're invested in what you're doing from a business perspective, and so they actually care enough about you to work with you.
Don't be afraid to reply rather than simply post. Like I said, again, if anyone is here likely today and trying to figure out tools of social media, it's likely that you want to connect with a shorter and smaller audience that is much more engaged in your product than your millionth user you're going to have down the line. So find ways to engage with them, take feedback, and do not shy away from criticism, because if someone's putting time into providing feedback, they most likely care about your product or service.
What I would also like to add, that I think a lot of businesses overlook how time-consuming social media is. So do make sure that you have a person who is well-trained and has the time to respond to your customers, engage with them. I think that I would suggest.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today on our panel. If anyone's got any questions, we'll just be on the left-hand side of the stage. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.